Rachel Holt for Nesson.com. Welcome to our Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm joined by Adam Rank of NFL Media. Adam, as always, thanks for joining us.
The pleasure, as always, is on this side of the phone. This is the highlight of my day, and I think that we can pull back the curtain a little bit. Say this is filmed on Thursday, before the big game, before the Patriots went out and stomped the Texans and embarrassed them once again. But outside of that, actually, you know what? For me, this is more important. This is my Thursday right here.
Well, I told you this is usually the best part of my Thursdays too, is talking to you. But unfortunately, today I am going to the Pats game, so it takes a little bit of a backseat. It's still very enjoyable to speak with you. You did tell me it's Taco Thursday, though, in your household, so this was kind of up there, I guess.
It's a big day for me. Yeah, I think it's cool. You know what? Listen, you're going to the game. I understand they're going to have those color rush uniforms. It's going to be awesome. I might feel the same way if I was in your shoes, but I completely understand where you're coming from.
All right. Well, regardless, very happy to be speaking with you, especially because you're kind of a big deal. I know you're a very humble guy and you would never brag about yourself, but we can do it. You can find you on Fantasy and Friends on the NFL Network. It's very cool. Not including yourself, you also get some big names on that show. So any recent cool people to come on the show?
Oh, my gosh. We just had one of New England's favorite sons from Providence, Rhode Island, Derek, the winner from Big Brother 16, which, and if you're a fan of that show, it's a huge thing if you're a fan of that show. And he's like super nice, super humble and knowledgeable and everything. And he was on, and I thought it was a cool thing. I dropped a Julie Chen, but first, and felt like that was the highlight of my broadcasting career. So it's been pretty cool. And we got Michael Rappaport on Friday, depending on when you're listening to this. Either he was on or he's going to be on. And if this is in front of that, I would hope that you guys would tune in because it's going to be a lot of fun. You know, he's a New Yorker. I get it. I understand there could be some heat there, but we can all admit that he's a fun guy.
We can all get along. You're an LA guy, and we still get along with you.
See?
You're not a prima donna like they say.
Well, you guys understand that Kobe's the best of all time, so that's why we get along.
This is true.
Why am I trying to ruin this?
Yeah, right from the get-go, all the listeners that were here, they're no longer here. That airs at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Very cool. Well, Adam, we're on to week 3 of the fantasy football season, or the NFL regular season, but more importantly, the fantasy football season. And we have a lot of questions. Week 2 is all about the injuries to running backs. Adrian Peterson underwent knee surgery this morning for a torn meniscus. He will be out several months. Danny Woodhead is done for the season with a torn ACL. Arian Foster suffered a groin injury. Looks like we'll see him in probably 2 weeks. So at this point, who are some running backs you're looking at to pick up the slack in week 3?
Well, I think a lot of people are going to make the obvious. Jonathan Stewart is another running back who's out too, is that you go for guys like Matt Asiata, Jerick McKinnon, Cameron Artis-Payne, and Fozzie Whitaker, and they're fine. I think they'll be okay. But I'm going to look a little bit deeper. We're going to be a little bit more speculative here. And here's a guy that I want everybody to get on board with right now. We talked about him on Fantasy and Friends last week. Now he's come into prominence a little bit more, but should be available hopefully on your waiver wire. And it's Dwayne "The Rock" Washington of the Detroit Lions. And I know that The Rock's real last name is Johnson in the WWE. I get it. Okay, his first name's Dwayne. Let me have some fun. I want to drop a people's elbow. So have a good time with that. But it's funny because this is the thing of where the running back position is now, that a guy who's going to get 12 touches is suddenly gold. Like, this is somebody that we're raving about, where 5 years ago you would never consider picking up a player of this ilk. But you know what? He's come into prominence. He's going to fill the role that is vacated by Amir Abdullah, who's out with an injury. He's going to be the back on first and second down. Theo Riddick is still their passing down back. He's still got an established role on that team. But Dwayne Washington actually looked pretty good. He jumped ahead of last year's fantasy darling, Zach Zenner, and took over that goal line job. And you just knew it was a matter of time before he was really going to make himself a factor with this offense. And then, again, a lot of these guys that you're seeing on the waiver wire are not going to help you this week. But if you look into the future, somebody like Jordan Howard, who played in that terrible Monday night game, and I don't blame anybody on the East Coast who went to bed at halftime and didn't want to watch the end of that. That's fine. That's what I do. But Jordan Howard was actually the best looking running back for the Bears. He averaged more than 7 yards a carry. So he looked really good. And I think as the season starts to wear on, he's going to have a bigger role with that team. Eventually will become the number one guy. John Fox just doesn't like to rush rookies into it. So he's doing a slow burn right now, but eventually Jordan Howard's going to be the guy. And another rookie to keep an eye on too is Kenny Dixon with the Baltimore Ravens. John Harbaugh is not thrilled with either option that he has with Justin Forsett or Terrence West. And so that one guy who I just said, Kenny Dixon, he's very talented. His tape looked good. He was great at Southern Miss. So he's somebody, again, who can be that guy starting in week 8 who becomes a real significant part of your fantasy team. So if you have an opportunity to go add him to your roster right now and stash him, I would suggest that you do it.
Okay, well, thanks. They all tuned out now because they're running to their computers. But for the people that are left, there's also a lot of questions about tight ends. They're giving people a lot of headaches. Those people who took Rob Gronkowski with one of their top picks are frustrated at this point, not sure how his health will factor into things in the beginning of the season. We'll actually touch on New England in a little bit. Obviously, a lot more questions with them. A lot of people were saying to pick up Eric Ebron if possible. He didn't do a whole lot in week 2. Zach Ertz is battling a rib injury. Martellus Bennett had an outstanding week 2 performance, but he'll likely be so inconsistent this season due to just how the Patriots do things. So who can we really look at in the tight end position?
Yeah, that's the one problem is that you talk about Eric Ebron, who was great in week 1, went back and scored 5.5 points in week 2, but that's pretty much par for the course with tight ends. We really just don't have guys like Gronkowski who, when healthy, is going to put up consistent numbers week in and week out. We just don't see it. So Eric Ebron is somebody that you're probably just going to want to skate with for the next couple of weeks as long as he's healthy, because he's ending up on the injury report as well. One guy that you can pick up for this week who has been a huge disappointment is Jared Cook. Now, he's a guy who's had potential, never quite made the name that we thought he was going to make. We thought perhaps coming to Green Bay, this was going to be his opportunity. The first 2 weeks, though, not very good. So, again, everybody's disappointed with him. But if you look at the way the Lions play against tight ends, they let Jack Doyle score 2 touchdowns in week 1. Last weekend, they gave up a huge game to Delaney Walker. So I call this the Doyle rules, is that anytime you have a matchup tight end to play against Detroit, you play him. So I'm going to give Jared Cook one last shot here. I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to give you the opportunity to go out and be that tight end that we thought you could be. And if not, then you're done forever. Like literally done forever. I will push to get him removed off of NFL.com's game if he does not come through. I do think too, a lot of people are upset with Kobe Fleener in the first couple of weeks,
Right.
and rightfully so. Like he was somebody that had high hopes because and I swear I'm not in a construction. I am actually in a construction zone. See, NFL Network ever expanding just to boost, just to find room for my big ego that I get from spending all this time with you. I do think though that Kobe Fleener was targeted, or I do know he was targeted in the red zone last week, which means that Drew Brees is starting to have a little bit more faith in him. They're trying to really work him into the offense, and I think it's safe to play him this week against the Falcons. The Falcons do good against regular wide receivers. They struggle against slot receivers and across the middle. So hopefully Kobe Fleener can have a huge game. Wow, this guy's pulling up like right on. Like I think he sees me sitting here, but he doesn't care. There
Are
it
you
is.
about to get run over or something?
It was like the slowest like run over scene ever, like Austin Powers with the bulldozer rolling. That's pretty much what was playing out here. I kid you not. Like I will sit out here and try to find a place to do my business, and yet there'll be like Shemp comes walking by with a cart full of like rusty trash cans or something, or this truck's backing into me. It's tough. It's tough going. Like you got to keep, like they say in the NFL, got to keep your head on a swivel at all times.
Right, well, you just got on this great new show, and you clearly haven't been enough of a diva because you haven't been making demands around there, so you might need to work on that, but
I need a room. No.
start now. Okay, we also have a lot of questions about New England, of course, because we are the New England Sports Network, and even though you're a Chicago Bears fan, you can still agree with New England's problem here that we need some answers. So, somewhere Bill Belichick is very proud of the fact that fantasy owners have no idea what to do this week with New England. Of course, Jimmy Garoppolo went down with an injury to his throwing shoulder on Sunday against the Dolphins. He had a short week to recover. We weren't sure if the Pats were going to start him or what was going on. We're now hearing that Jacoby Brissett will start at quarterback for the Patriots and Jimmy G will be the backup. And it's worth noting that Edelman will be the emergency QB in New England. So that's kind of scary. What do you make of this situation with the Pats, and what does it mean for fantasy owners?
This is one of the reasons why I don't heavily invest in Patriots players. And I know it's frustrating, and a lot of people, I think it's part of the reason why people do not like the New England Patriots. I'm not one of those people because I love Tom Brady, of course. I think he's the GOAT, and we'll say that. And I'm not pandering because you can go look through my body of work and you'll know that I've always said this. But it's the one thing that I can respect, though, is that he's really good as a football coach, and you just kind of know that the uncertainty is part of the certainty. Whereas, you just got to be able to what's going on with Bill Belichick. Try to figure out the scripts of how the game's going to unfold. And I know, excuse me, last week I felt like LeGarrette Blount, we talked about this a little bit, LeGarrette Blount was in line for a big game because of what they wanted to do against this particular team and always finding ways to get the most out of his players. I think the best example is what they did with Martellus Bennett last week, because in week 1, they had him in the slot and it really just wasn't working. So this week, they put him at the tight end position, hit him on the line, and all of his receptions were those short passes out of the tight end position. Now, he did line up in the slot, but he didn't get any receptions from the slot. They're all from the tight end position. So I like the way that he mixes it up, and it's if you're kind of a geeky person who really likes to try to figure out what Bill Belichick's got going on, it's a fun game of cat and mouse. Although this week with Jacoby, I'm not trying to get into that business. I like Julian Edelman, and that's about it. Everything else is too risky for me on a Thursday night. So, but I think over the next couple of weeks, Tom's coming back soon, then things will calm down and then things will be okay. And if you can survive these next couple of games, not knowing what's happening with Rob Gronkowski and things like that, then I think we'll be okay.
Too much uncertainty for me. I don't know what's going to go on there tonight. That worries me. I have no idea.
But you're a Pats fan. That's fine. Your team wins all the time. It's okay. You'll sacrifice the fantasy glory just to have your team win all the time. I would happily have that problem. I would literally trade that for anything. I can't play my favorite players in fantasy. That's fine. My team wins all the time. That's cool.
It is taken for granted. A big step that I made today was I dropped the Pats defense from my fantasy team. And it's because we're told not to get attached to our defenses. The wisest of the fantasy football experts will tell you to look at the week's matchups and make decisions on who's playing. So I picked up Miami's defense.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's a great move. That's a savvy move. You know what you've got to do. That's what you want to do. You want to look at the matchups that can exploit it. Cody Kessler going to be making the start for the Cleveland Browns. He doesn't push the ball down the field. He's probably prone to make some mistakes. I don't think that he's as polished as Carson Wentz. So I think he's going to go out there and have some trouble. Even with a defense that's not great like Miami's, I think that it's going to be bad news for him. So that's a great pickup. That's smart.
Going off of this, what other defenses should we target in week 3 if you're in that mindset of dropping your defenses based on what's favorable?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, if you can't get Miami, I would look for Tampa Bay. It's tough because Todd Gurley is so good for the Rams, and this seems like he's poised for a breakout game because they're certainly giving him the ball a lot for him to get that opportunity to make a huge impact. But I think with the quarterback play that we've seen from them over the first couple of weeks, I think you're safe to play. Even if Todd Gurley has a huge game, I think the quarterback can go out there and make some mistakes. I think you got some opportunities for some turnovers. And the cross-country flight, the Rams played both games on the West Coast. Now they have to go across country to play in Tampa. I asked MJD, I said, is this a real thing or is this a narrative that people just like to spin? But he guarantees me it's a real thing. So I would look for Tampa Bay this week.
Okay, and in terms of survivor leagues, I know we always touch on this. This week is kind of a tough one. It looks like a lot of people are going to look at that Miami Dolphins Cleveland Browns game and pick Miami. Other people are looking at the Lions at the Packers, with the Packers favored to win. The 49ers at Seattle with the Seahawks as the heavy favorites. Who's a safe bet this week in a Survivor League?
Oh, I know. It's so dicey. Like, I really, really did not like this week at all. Detroit going to Green Bay. It's interesting because Detroit won in Green Bay last year. That was the 1991. And Detroit probably should have swept Green Bay last year because, of course, Aaron Rodgers pulled out that stupid miracle play or whatever, won that game. So they should have been swept. Rodgers didn't really have a great, because you take away that 61-yard touchdown bomb, and Rodgers would have been in line for like 212 yards and a touchdown. So it wasn't playing great. So I wouldn't see that one as easy. I think Miami, it's funny because how many times do you think over the course of the season would you take Miami? Like, this would be it, right? There's really no other matchups that you're looking at. And I know a lot of people will probably just spend their entire time just picking against the Browns. But, yeah, you want to win, so that's what you should do. I think the Browns are going to get a win at some point. I don't like it to be at Miami, so that one's a pretty good one for me. I'm tempted to go Giants. I don't think anybody in New England would want to go Giants. I'm tempted to go Giants, but they're 2-0. Washington's 0-2. This just seems like the Giants just have a huge letdown. Like, it just seems like that's the way that's going to go. So I'm going to stick with. You know what? I would have liked. Yeah, I'm going to go with Miami. I've been kicking this around all day, trying to figure it out, but I think Miami is probably our safest bet.
Well, it's because you're never going to pick Miami again during the season. So already you got them out of the way. So, I don't know. It makes me nervous, too. I don't know.
I know. There's usually one that's, like, even Seattle, where you were talking about, like, I don't feel great about it. Russell Wilson last year, his passer rating on third down was 117 point something. This year it's 33. You're like, oh, my God, it's awful. So, I just don't trust it. I've seen Pete Carroll as the coach of USC coach down to his competition way too many times. I'm thinking of all those losses to Stanford that should have never happened. So I'm going to avoid them too. So I think we've talked ourselves into Miami.
Okay, that's the pick. Rolling with it. And then as far as predictions go, you always give us some good little nuggets. So in week 1, you told us to pick up Spencer Ware in the wake of Jamal Charles' injury. He had a blowout week. You single-handedly won me my fantasy matchup that week. So I'll never forget that. Who's going to have a big week 3? What is your prediction for this?
I should have used that Spencer Ware as my walk-off. I should have just disappeared after that and gone into witness protection or something of that nature. Just to be on the safe side. It's a funny week, though, because it's really, looking at it, it always seems like there's one guy who stands out, who you look at and just kind of think like, oh, this is the guy who's going to have a breakout. And I don't want to go too chalky because I think Odell Beckham Jr. is due for a huge breakout game. I don't know if Eli Manning is the kind of quarterback who really wants to do right by his receiver, because I would have looked at it last year after what Josh Norman was trying to do to Odell Beckham Jr. And then I would be, as a quarterback, I would be offended. And I would be like, you know what? I want to make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen again. And I would go after, Odell and really try to get him going. But I really, if I had to make one pick, I know I'm actually stalling now. I think, okay, this is it. This is the one that I'm going to do. This is the one I feel good about this guy. I talk about him each and every week. I've been a huge fan of his ever since he was at the University of Oregon. I think Marcus Mariota has a huge game this week going up against Oakland. The last 2 weeks, Oakland has given up more than 500 yards in back-to-back games. This is the first time in franchise history that that's ever happened, which is unbelievable for me to believe because Oakland's been terrible for the last decade? Ever since you guys ended the Oakland franchise, which thank you, by the way. And this is why you can tell that my sincerity with my love for Belichick and the Patriots is that you pretty much ruined the Oakland Raiders with the Tuck Rule game, which to me was probably the greatest thing I might have ever seen as a football fan. But whatever. That's true. Like, it's one of those things, like, kids, like, you have to explain to kids, like, oh yeah, there was this play, and there was a time, it's got to be weird for people who are like, hey, there was a time when New England wasn't the best football team, like, where it was automatic, where you see all these teams come and go, but, like, New England's good every year. And it's like, and now it seems like sometimes Bill Belichick just turns the game onto all Madden mode and tries to see if he can raise the level of difficulty, because they still go out and win. Like, they started Jimmy Garoppolo, who I like, still win. And now
Right.
Jacoby's going to be the starting. I'm so hesitant to say his last name because I swear to you, every time I always say Brisket, and I'm trying to teach my
It's so
mind not to say
tempting.
that.
Right.
But the thing is like, they'll end up listen, this could end up blowing up in my face, but I feel confident. Like, they'll beat the Texans, and everybody will be like, "What? What's going on?" And it's like, but it's Bill Belichick. Like, this is what happens. He beats everybody. Like, there was a fluke last year. I mean, it was a fluke last year, and it's figures that Peyton Manning would get another fluke Super Bowl, because if that kid doesn't fumble the punt in Denver, then New England has home field advantage, and there is no way in the world that Peyton Manning would have rolled in and won the AFC Championship game in New England, especially in a snowstorm. Like, that would have never happened. But I'm getting off the point talking about Marcus Mariota. Mariota will be good. I'm sorry. I'll keep it short. I'll self-edit myself here.
Any other final nuggets you have for us? Words of wisdom, or should we just take it and run with it? All the stuff that you've been giving us.
You know what? I think I've covered all my major talking points. Let me just take a quick look at the schedule right here. There's really nothing. It's a weird week. Like, it's really like putting together all my columns and everything and just trying to figure it out. It's like every once in a while you get these weeks where you're just like, there's not. I'm excited for the Green Bay Detroit game because for whatever reason, I have so much action on the Lions all over the place. I've got Stafford on a bunch of teams. I have Marvin Jones Jr. everywhere. So, but other than that, that's it. Go get Jordan Howard, Dwayne Washington. Evan Silva of Roto World actually said the other day too, he piled on this Dwayne Washington business by saying this guy could win you your league. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take that. So that's what I got for you. So that's a good one. And that's it. And as always, thank you so much for having me. This is always a pleasure.
All good stuff. And depending on what happens in the game tonight, this may have been the favorite part of my Thursday. I don't know yet, but it could have very well been.
I say even with the Patriots win, for me, this was still the highlight, with the Taco Thursday coming in a close second. But again, always a pleasure.
Okay, thanks, Adam. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam Ray.